Hi, I'm Sylvie from HR.com, and I'll be your webcast host today. Thank you for joining us for today's webcast, Why Your DE&I Strategy is Failing, sponsored by Wiley Education Services and presented by Sarah Callahan and Natasha DeJesus. This webcast has been pre-approved for one HRCI credit. Please be sure to attend the complete webcast in order to receive your credit. Throughout the webcast, please submit your questions using the Q&A tab on your controls, and we'll do our best to answer them at the end of the session. And it's now my pleasure to turn it over to today's presenters.
Thank you so much, Sylvie. Good afternoon and welcome to Why Your DE&I Strategy is Failing. I'm Natasha DeJesus, Director of Enterprise Learning Solutions and DE&I Board Co-Chair here at Wiley Education Services. I am joined by my colleague, Sarah Callahan, who is our Director of Marketing. She has researched and written extensively on the topic of DE&I and unconscious bias over the past 7 years. Sarah and I focus our work on an education benefit solution called Wiley Beyond, which aligns talent strategy with business strategy. Today, we'll be discussing why diversity, equity, and inclusion is not a passing trend. It's an effective way for businesses to attract and retain talented people. And if you want to innovate and succeed, you must have a diverse talent pool. Not only that, you must create an environment where that diverse talent can move up within your organization. It sounds simple, and yet as companies are building their DE&I strategies and their plans, they're just missing some key components. So we'll cover that in this presentation and what those key components are. We'll also talk about how you can generate buy-in to implement change in your diversity strategy. We'll discuss what actions you can take to attract and retain diverse talent. We'll cover how strategic workplace and education can advance your diversity. Finally, we'll talk about how authentic DE&I programs respond to the unique needs of your company and protect your most valuable asset, your people. So let's get started. We'll start the presentation today by defining the underrepresented groups that should be considered when we discuss diversity, equity, and inclusion. These include, but are not limited to, race, age, country of origin and ethnicity, disability, both visible and invisible, gender identity, neurodiversity, sexual orientation, pregnancy, veteran status, and returning citizens, those who were formerly incarcerated. And there are others, so we would love to hear from you. Please do use the chat function and feature here in this presentation to share with us any underrepresented groups you may include in your organization's DE&I strategy. Now let's talk a little bit about the shift in DE&I over the years. Sarah?
Yeah, so years ago, companies thought of diversity and inclusion more in terms of employee assimilation. But over the last several years, and last year in 2020 in particular, there's really been a spotlight on the issue of diversity and the corporate social responsibility that goes along with that. So we put some stats here. A 2017 survey found that 78% of people want organizations to focus on social justice issues. 76% of consumers won't buy from a company that opposes issues that they care about. And 87% of consumers will buy from a company that supports issues that they care about. So like Natasha said, DE&I is not a passing trend. It's not just the right thing to do, it's good for business. So then why do corporate diversity issues, corporate diversity leaders face resistance and lack of funding for their programs? It's often because there's a lack of measurement of the impact. I think we've all faced this. If you work in DE&I, you often face resistance to the work that you're doing and in getting funding for the programs that you do. And one of the biggest issues and reasons that you might face resistance is because of diversity turnover within the company. In fact, we found that 84% of executives acknowledged that the high rate of diversity turnover impacted their decision to fund DE&I programs. So you start to see the circular problem here. If you don't fund these programs, you're going to keep having high turnover. So what does this mean? So in order to get buy-in, you're going to need a strong DE&I strategy where your executives can clearly see the tie to positive business outcomes. They need realistic business outcomes. I want you to think about your diversity strategy. Is it fully developed? So maybe let's start by looking at signs of an underdeveloped business DE&I strategy. So if you expect your DE&I or your diversity officer to fix everything, you most likely have an underdeveloped diversity strategy. Or if your chief diversity officer reports directly to HR instead of the CEO, you probably have an underdeveloped diversity strategy. If there's little company-wide dialogue about diversity, racism, bias, etc., you most likely have an underdeveloped diversity strategy. Or if your strategy focuses purely on diversity in hiring and stops there, it's most likely underdeveloped. If you have weak buy-in and budgeting for strategic diversity initiatives, it's definitely underdeveloped. If the diversity awareness is limited to only women and Black professionals, not those other underrepresented groups that Natasha previously mentioned, again, it's a sign of an underdeveloped strategy. And finally, if you expect your diverse employees to assimilate to the company culture rather than transforming the culture to include them, this is definitely a sign of an underdeveloped strategy. So let's stop here and have a poll. Sylvia, if you'll launch the poll, I'd like you to select, and you can select as many of these signs as you see within your company. Don't just pick the top one, but any of the signs that you see within your company, I'd like you to tick off, and we can talk through a few of these that we see most often within our company. And I'd really like you to be honest within your with yourself, because we all start somewhere. We'll take just a few seconds here to talk through these. And I'd also love, once you've had a chance to select a few of these, this is not an all-encompassing list. There are certainly going to be more than these. We probably could have kept writing them all day. So if there's other signs of an underdeveloped strategy that maybe you think that we could add to the list, feel free to add that in the chat as well. All right, we'll give this a few more seconds, and then Sylvie, when you think we've gotten a good response there, let's close this off. And
wow,
Natasha, why don't you tell us, walk us through some of these results here?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a pretty good mix. So for expecting the CDO to fix everything, it's about 23%. The CDO reports to HR, not the CEO, 15%. There's little company-wide dialogue about diversity, racism, bias, et cetera. That comes in at the most, at the highest, 54%. Strategies focus on diversity and hiring alone, 31%. Weak buy-in and budgeting for strategic diversity initiatives at 47%. Diversity awareness limited to women and Black professionals at 23%. And then lastly here, expecting diverse employees to assimilate to company culture rather than transforming the culture to include them at 43%. The interesting thing about these numbers is, before the murder of George Floyd last year and Breonna Taylor, I could imagine that these numbers were probably much, much higher. I know a lot of work has been done this past year to make efforts and strides in advancing diversity initiatives and plans within organizations. So, I see this in talking with, clients day in and day out about DE&I strategies and aligning that with education, et cetera. And this is very common across the board. So I appreciate everyone chiming in and sharing this. And we'll definitely touch on some of these throughout the presentation today.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to bring up, and we'll get into this a little bit, but I also, you brought up a good point there that there's certainly a lot more dialogue, especially last year, about certain groups. And I wonder if there's more dialogue to be had about other underrepresented groups. So we'll talk about what some of those other underrepresented groups might be. But I wonder if we're just starting the conversation. And I think we need to keep that dialogue going as well. So
absolutely.
I'd like for some of you to take note too. So I'm going to keep this slide up here for just a few more seconds. it sounds like many of you see signs of I didn't see any of the results where the percentages were very low for any particular answer. But if there's any answer on here where you're thinking, I'd really like to deep dive into this, or maybe you don't even quite understand why is that on this list, or for whatever reason you want to talk through it a little bit more, write it down. Let's talk about it at the during the Q&A session at the end, or if you want to come visit us at the Wiley Beyond booth after this session. We'd really love to deep dive into it, either in this group within this hour-long session, or if you want to talk to us one-to-one, we'd really love to talk to you. And whether we have time in this hour or maybe afterwards, let's talk about why it's on the list, or how it might be affecting your company in particular.
And Sarah, I did just want to call out a couple of comments that have been sent in by a few of the attendees. One was, companies are only focusing on the numbers, diversity, but not inclusion. And I see that all too often. It's like, hey, come to the party, you're welcome. But it's the, hey, come to the party and I'm going to invite you to dance too and have fun and enjoy your time with us. And I think that that piece is also a huge component of kind of why we're having these presentations, why we're including equity and inclusion, and going beyond just diversity within strategies. Another one was, it seems many DE&I efforts ignore the issue of ageism, which is often seen in recruitment and selection. Absolutely 100% right. And we'll talk a little bit about kind of some of the challenges when it comes to talent acquisition in DE&I.
Yeah, and ageism, actually, that's a great one to call out on both ends of the spectrum. So, you know, as a leader, both as an individual contributor and as a leader in a business, I can speak from personal experience here. So, as an individual contributor and as a leader in a business, I definitely understand where ageism plays a role in a business, and I can tell you that, you know, people that are just starting out their career, they bring a ton of innovation, they bring a ton of great ideas. And people that are late in their career, they bring a ton of great skills and experience. And I think that, you know, that is why we included age and as one of these points of DE&I that very often gets overlooked. And that's why we had that huge list of underrepresented groups, because it is one of those things, along with things like pregnancy and returning citizens, that we really need to make sure that all of those groups are really considered in a DE&I strategy, and it should be talked about along with gender and sexual orientation. They are all things that need equal weight and need to be considered.
Absolutely. Great. And there are some other questions coming in, but we'll definitely touch on those as we get through this presentation today. So thank you all for chatting and chiming in. So next slide, Sarah. So the journey towards reaching and really fulfilling your diversity goals is more than just checking boxes. It's about cultivating diversity on a system level, which means attracting and retaining people of all kinds in all departments with numerous and complementary skills. Companies that lack refined diversity strategies often say things like, there just simply isn't enough diverse talent from which to choose. And as some of you may know in the audience today, this rhetoric has publicly landed companies in the hot seat and in the hot water, and weakened brand trust. These organizational leaders are thinking too small and too conventionally. Not only are they failing to recruit outside of their usual networks, but they're also failing to see the whole value a candidate has to offer and bring to the table. So let's take a look at what hiring managers must instead consider. Hiring managers must consider, does the candidate bring identities or life experience that I don't have on my team? For example, if you're recruiting talent in the human or social services field, did that candidate share a story of their own personal experience that may show they have the skills to cultivate a better client experience? They must also consider, which transferable skills does the candidate offer? For example, the candidate may not have direct B2B sales experience. However, they have transferable skills from their leadership role in retail sales that would make them a great addition to the team. And once they're on your team, you can use the resources that you have internally or externally to upskill them. Lastly, they must consider which skills can be learned on the job and or through company-sponsored educational development. To increase diversity, hire great people who have the basic fundamental skills for the role and use internal resources or even tuition assistance to upskill that employee. So hiring managers will need to think about, when they're looking at diverse professionals, they want to go ahead and look at not the traditional candidate that just fits the team. They've got to look way beyond that. Since increased innovation is one of the main benefits diversity creates for employers, team leaders themselves need to think more creatively about which skills and experience can be most valuable to the team. The case for hiring talent whose life experience or innate skills your company cannot teach is tremendous. Consider prioritizing the hiring of individuals whose identities and life experiences represent the diversity of your target market. And look at those individuals who are currently underrepresented on your team. So a little bit of story time here, a little bit of background on me and who I am here at Wiley and what I've kind of gone through in my career. So when I first joined Wiley at the very young age of 24, I was a university admissions counselor. I was placed onto a university account that required me to have in-depth discussions with VPs, presidents, and CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. I was helping them find a degree program that would align with their specific personal learning goals. Now, this was back in 2009 when many senior leaders were laid off, and unfortunately, because of the new demand and requirement of a 4-year degree back then and now, they were left with no choice but to pursue higher ed to make themselves more marketable. Now, I myself had just graduated college with a degree in political science and English, and I had never taken a business class a day in my life, yet alone never worked in a position that would require me to learn about business operations. Well, I failed in that role. Yeah, I felt pretty hard because I couldn't relate to or truly understand the needs of the individuals I was in communication with. But Wiley did see the value that I brought to the organization. So they knew I had the fundamental skills to succeed in the role, but they realized I was on the wrong account. And they transitioned me onto an account where I would work with applicants who were interested in the social services and healthcare fields. I had tons of volunteer experience, a true passion for helping others, and personal stories I could share of my own journey. I understood the student and could pinpoint the exact program that matched and aligned to their specific personal and professional needs. Even though I didn't have much student enrollment or admissions experience, I excelled in the role because of my own personal journey and my experiences. And guess what? During that time, Wiley awarded me a scholarship to pursue business courses to gain those skills that allowed me to advance in my career here and also to be successful in my current role, working once again with the C-suite. And I've been with Wiley almost 11 years now. So the value of prioritizing the life experience of historically marginalized professionals by investing in their careers should not be underestimated. When you include more people and level the playing field, you're really setting your business up for long-term competitiveness. Don't just hire for who people are today, hire for who people can be tomorrow.
I want you to think about your interview process. Do you think it's a fair one? You probably do. You probably interview people looking for great communication skills for most of your roles, if not all of your roles, right? You probably look for good eye contact and a good handshake. I mean, maybe not right now, maybe in non-COVID times, you're looking for a good handshake. Do you look for people that are quick on their feet to give great, eloquent answers? The problem is all of those things might disqualify someone with an invisible disability. I personally have an invisible disability. I have epilepsy and I've had a seizure in the workplace. I can tell you that many people are not educated on what epilepsy is and what causes it. And while my personal disability, it actually rarely affects me, and certainly not on a daily basis. It doesn't affect me in a job interview. An invisible disability like autism likely would affect someone's ability to get a job. They might be perceived differently in the job interview process that I just described. MarketWatch says the biggest problem with the job interview process is that it's so focused on socialization and communication skills, it puts many adults with autism at a disadvantage. And yet, people with autism, they can bring innate high impact skills that would greatly benefit a business. Many people with autism have skills that include high memory, extreme focus, advanced innovation, attention to detail, honesty, and loyalty. These skills and systems, they can be learned through employer-sponsored education, but the life experience and the inborn skills of people from historically underrepresented backgrounds, that can't be trained. So companies need to place more value on the unteachable, the lived experience of minority professionals when they decide who to hire. I really encourage all of you to hire for the experience that you can't cultivate. So after hearing that, I'd like to ask Sylvie to bring up another poll. Do you think that your company's current hiring process might put certain groups of people at a disadvantage, even if it's unintentional? If you're not sure, if you're not involved in the hiring process, you can put unsure, but I really encourage you to check yes or no if at all possible. And to, again, as I said in the last one, to be honest with yourselves. I know we all do try our best, but like I said, sometimes it can be unintentional and we do have to start from somewhere. So I do encourage you to be honest with where you're starting from today, because you can always improve. And with that, since it is a quick one, let's start there. Okay, and so we've got 59% saying yes, you do think your company's interview process today might put certain groups of people at a disadvantage, 17% saying no, and 24% of people saying they're unsure. So with 59% of people saying yes, they think they might put certain groups of people at a disadvantage, even if unintentionally. I do wonder if maybe we should have, Natasha asked it before and after. Like, put a poll question before we kind of talked through it, Natasha, and done it before and after that little session there.
Yeah, I'd love to hear kind of why, what people are thinking, or like what they're seeing in their organization. So, I mean, if you'd like to share, you can share in the chat. Just from talking with other HR and talent acquisition leaders, I've found that even things like psychometric testing, that's one of the challenges and disadvantages. Looking at the GPA requirement, some organizations are still looking at the GPA requirement. Even the automated video interviewing technology, that poses some disadvantages for some groups of individuals. There's just so many things, unpaid internships. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, but I'd love to hear from our audience if there are any others that you could chime in and add as well.
Definitely, and there are, like you said, things like the GPA requirement, but there are a lot of people as well, even things like having ADHD and all of that makes testing really difficult. But then there are so many people that may have certain invisible disabilities. Certainly visible disabilities are easier to diagnose and understand and accommodate for, but invisible disabilities are a lot more difficult to accommodate, both because the person might not tell you. A lot of the employers that I've had, I never tell them that I have a disability, but also the individual might never be diagnosed. And so that makes it much more difficult for them to know what accommodations they might need. And then if they go all the way through school, they might, have lower grades. They might never get accommodated for that. That might make their whole employment history more difficult. So that might set them back. And, us offering education benefits, I can tell you that it makes it causes a cascading effect of, it makes education more difficult, which makes work more difficult, which, as I said, it causes a cascading effect. So just keep that in mind, and we'll get into it a little bit later, but I want to keep in mind that we'll talk about the need for the 4-year degree and all of that, but keep in mind that certain invisible disabilities may make certain aspects of education a bit more difficult for some folks.
And I did want to just call out some of the comments made in the chat. So language barriers,
Yeah.
Your name on the resume, that's a big one too. Lack of value for non-traditional work experience, absolutely. So, these are, they're kind of coming in. There's a few of them: technology barriers, excessive interviews. So yeah, you all are absolutely right. There's so many kind of disadvantages, and it's like, how do we create an interview process that is that kind of sets a playing field that is equal and equitable for all candidates. So let's take a look at, let's go ahead and advance the slide. All right, now let's think about some of the tactics and initiatives to achieving your DE&I goals. So the bottom line here is people need to see people that look like them in positions of leadership and throughout the company. They need to know that there is a career path for them at their place of employment. When people of historically disenfranchised backgrounds don't see themselves throughout a company or even notice others advocating for them, isolation sets in and that imposter syndrome starts to develop. It is important to employees' mental health, productivity, and creativity as well to see others who look like them and to have safe spaces just for them. It is also beneficial to create opportunities for proven allies to support as well. So ERGs, or employee resource groups, are a great addition to your strategy to help create those safe spaces. But those ERGs need to be more intersectional than ever before. For example, when it comes to groups for LGBTQ employees, these have disproportionately represented gay white men. Of employees who self-identified as LGBTQ, 54% of employees identified as women, 53% of them were between the ages of 18 to 24, and 7% of them were non-white professionals over the age of 55. Studies also indicated that some groups were less likely to self-identify as LGBTQ in the workplace, which might explain the disproportionate percentages for certain age groups and races. But on a positive note, straight professionals under the age of 35 are 3.6 times more likely to take part in ally groups compared to previous generations. We have more allies in the workplace than ever before, and that number is only expecting to rise.
Okay, so let's be honest, almost all of us work because we have to pay the bills, right? So paying people well for what they do is not only an acknowledgement of accomplishment. When companies pay people of historically marginalized group equal to their more privileged counterparts, it sends a clear signal that they are in fact viewed as personally valuable and equal. Companies need to make sure that diverse employees are equitably paid at or near the top of their pay scales, both upon hiring, but also throughout their career, right? So when you hire someone, don't just don't just compare salaries when you first hire them, continue to compare throughout promotions and throughout the course of their employment. So we did consider adding a poll question in here about pay at your company. But it's something that if you, I'm sure many of you attended the very first session first thing this morning when HR.com went through the survey results. So I feel like many of the sessions today have gone through pay, including that very first one this morning, which was very well done. And so I'm going to skip that poll question, but I do want you to really honestly and carefully consider pay, both upon hiring and throughout the course of employment for your employees. And also consider all of the various groups that we've talked about. So as someone brought up in the comments, across age and across experience, across race and gender and disability, and all of the different groups that we've talked about. And then let's go through a similar topic that many of us have experienced, the glass ceiling. So the glass ceiling is when you want to advance, but maybe don't receive either the proper opportunity to upskill, and then not receiving the proper appreciation when you do. Historically, underserved staff usually finds themselves against a glass ceiling. So it's essentially, you're told, if you improve on this skill, or if only you went and got this certificate, you could get a promotion. So you go and get their certificate and find, actually, I didn't get that promotion that I was promised. That's when you run into that glass ceiling. So ensuring you have a solid strategy for building your employees' skills and rewarding them with career advancement shows that your organization is invested in who they are and what they have to offer. We're going to talk a bit more about upskilling options in a few minutes, but I want you to consider the glass ceiling and whether there are specific groups within your organization that might face more challenges than others in advancing. Is upskilling really the root problem here? I've talked to a lot of employees that actually turn down the opportunity to upskill, and they turn down the opportunity for learning and development because they feel like even if they take up that offer, they won't be promoted anyway. So they don't want to kind of waste their time and their efforts. They need to know that if they take that time and that effort, there is a clear career path ready and waiting for them. Now, something we always recommend as part of your DE&I strategy is also sponsorship. Diverse employees require sponsorship and mentorship from more senior staff just as much, if not more, than everyone else. More privileged employees are more likely to automatically receive mentorship and guidance. Organizations need to ensure their staff of various backgrounds receive this same attention. Now, ideally, there are diverse senior staff members who they can identify with, and they can mentor those junior staff members. But where there's a lack of racial diversity in the senior staff, or it's just not present throughout your organization, companies need to be even more deliberate about mentorship and the subsequent job satisfaction that goes along with that. While managerial seniority doesn't always correlate with age, the need for teams of diverse ages should be prioritized specifically. According to one study, 85% of employees surveyed felt that diversity of age was key to their team's ability to innovate.
So now let's consider your overall benefits package. Regardless of demographics, benefits programs should improve employees' lives on all levels, right? So reducing friction in your employees' personal lives means reducing friction in their productivity. Staff of historically marginalized groups encounter much more friction navigating the world than do their more privileged counterparts. For instance, working parents find themselves struggling with work-life balance and in need of more employer support. But due to implicit gender and racial bias, women of color are even likelier to suffer. When companies strategically select benefit programs that prioritize the needs of the most vulnerable, all staff benefit. So businesses should be investing in career benefits as well, such as employee-sponsored education, which paves the way to advancement and in turn provides companies with much needed skill sets to stay competitive. While companies need to back up the incentive to learn with clearly delineated and implemented advancement strategies and plans, such benefits are directly and mutually beneficial. When companies continue to treat women and minority employees as just another box to be checked, morale of diverse employees dwindles. They're vulnerable to being poached by recruiters or making concerted plans to leave. Not only do such individuals become flight risks, potentially exposing an organization's culture of continued bias and disenfranchisement. But companies also risk losing the talent they've spent precious time, money, and resources recruiting.
So whether it's in terms of like race or sexual orientation, gender identity, beyond, when organizations start to implement diversity strategies, there's virtually always going to be a seniority gap. Oftentimes the only top leader that's of a less privileged identity, it's the chief diversity officer. And by contrast, the company may overall show promising diversity numbers, when in reality, these employees are usually working in low-wage consumer-facing roles. In fact, as of 2020, as you can see on the screen, only 0.3% of Fortune 500 board members are openly out as LGBTQ+. It was only in 2018 that Beth Ford, the CEO of Land O'Lakes, became the first openly gay woman to run a Fortune 500 company. One study showed that 19% of Black respondents, that's 23% of Black men and 16% of Black women, reported feeling that someone of their race or ethnicity would never achieve a high position. That's compared to only 3% of white respondents. Forbes said that one of the primary reasons why Black talent leaves an organization is a lack of growth opportunities and inaccessibility to those in leadership positions. And yet, according to McKinsey, in the United States, there's a linear relationship between racial and ethnic diversity and better financial performance. So for every 10% increase in racial and ethnic diversity on the senior executive team, earnings before interest and taxes rise 0.8%. So, like we said, diversity is good for business. That's because when your employees are happier, they stay longer. And it's because your company then reflects the marketplace. It reflects your consumers, it reflects America, it reflects the global market.
So as organizations develop and implement more sophisticated plans, they may first need to hire diverse middle and senior management outright. In addition to redefining what experience is most valuable to the team, companies would also need to change up their recruiting pools. Experienced and qualified individuals of numerous backgrounds are out there, but recruiters may need to take a different approach to finding them. At the same time, companies can begin to develop educational pathways for entry-level staff to join the team. In this case, companies will want to consider such options as building a talent pipeline with universities. And according to NACE, one of the most common ways to attract a more diverse talent pool is to partner with HBCUs, other organizations, to gain a more diverse talent, to have access to widen that net. Enabling paid internship fellowship programs. These paid internships, they allow your organization to cast a much wider net when it comes to recruiting diverse talent as well. Establishing mentorship programs. So many successful mentorship programs, they start at day one of hire and they run through the first 2 years of an employee's careers. These mentorship programs, they allow the employee to upskill and begin to develop their desired career path. And create an outline for future employee-sponsored re-education. So align your career pathing with learning pathways to ensure employees have access to the right education they need when they need it. Showing young professionals very real and attainable opportunities can win them over early, creating dedicated brand advocates and long-term company innovators. When increasing diversity within the organization, it's important to remember some minority professionals may be harder to identify and recruit because they don't openly self-identify. For instance, individuals with invisible disabilities or who are LGBTQ+ may only disclose their identity if and when they feel safe to do so, which may be never. As a result, companies need to be even more proactive and upfront about their DE&I stance in order to better attract diverse talent. When I first started at Wiley, I was not out. I am also a member of the LGBTQ plus community. And it did take me a little while until I saw that we actually started an LGBTQ ERG for me to actually feel safe, feel comfortable, and come out. So it does take time, but it shouldn't. It should be something that is visible, that allows people to be their true authentic selves within the workplace. All of these things here, they're best used in tandem as they're all mutually beneficial. Whether hiring early or mid-career, laying out a clear course for advancement, supported by pay parity, mentorship, and an intelligent upskilling program will be necessary for long-term company health.
Now, what does a truly transformational DE&I strategy look like? So far, we've talked about tactics. Now let's talk about building your strategy. So achieving racial equity is really just the beginning. As we've seen, it's not enough to just hire diverse talent to fill your company's ranks. And it's not enough to just make people feel like they belong. You can spend considerable time up front simply recruiting and creating safe, inclusive spaces. But without a truly comprehensive plan that aims not only to attract, but to cultivate and improve the lives of the people you need, your dollars are only going to go so far. Companies ultimately need to think about more than diversity. They even need to think past inclusion or belonging. They need to commit to the kind of transformation that builds equity. Diversity and inclusion provide the baseline. The diagram here illustrates that companies will initially set the groundwork by working on diversity. So they hire a chief diversity officer who reports directly to the CEO, right? We talked earlier about an underdeveloped strategy where the CDO reports to HR. So for a great strategy, the CDO should report to the CEO. And the CDO and the CEO need to work together in concert. From there, the CDO and the CEO need to provide the thought leadership around DE&I and hire diverse staff in all departments and at all levels. After that, the journey continues with inclusion. And at this stage, the company has a more open culture addressing the tough issues of bias and prejudice. Everyone feels a baseline of safety and acceptance having these conversations. Employees of disenfranchised backgrounds are going to enjoy a sense of community working alongside and in employee resource groups. They have mentors who can help guide their career journeys. And then equity makes a complete strategy. The diversity and inclusion stages set the stage for the greatest goal, an advanced equity-driven strategy. In the equity stage, companies focus on ensuring diverse employees aren't just represented or included, but they're recognized and they're elevated in position and in power and in pay. In fact, without an equity-first approach, diversity and inclusion efforts are going to go wrong. Without a comprehensive employee value proposition aimed at diverse employees that includes them and drives organizational equity, the initial diversity plan will have already failed. So to be successful and achieve the greatest ROI, employers must develop strategic equity plans.
And if you're interested in why we've put education here at the top of the DE&I pyramid, let's just spend a few minutes talking through that piece. Workplace education is a broad term that applies to the development of career building skills within your organization. It refers to the acquisition of both hard and soft skills through formal learning and workplace training. So let's pause for a moment for a quick poll. We want to know, do you offer tuition assistance or education benefits at your organization?
Okay, and let's see what these results look like. Oh, wow, that's great.
Great.
So Looks like 63% at yes, 33%, so about a third of you do not, and 4%, a few of you are not sure if you do or not.
Great. I'd be curious to know how those tuition assistance programs align with your DE&I strategy. So if you share that in the chat, that would be wonderful. And I'll talk a little bit about kind of what that means. So education benefits are so critical to DE&I. Like all areas in life, historically underrepresented people are not automatically given the same resources and privileges as others. Therefore, at first glance, they may appear to have gaps in skill or education. When companies continue to hire the same more privileged people who seem to check all the usual boxes, you further cement systemic inequity and lose the chance to innovate. Critical to this topic is continuing education. So workplace-sponsored education is one of the foundational benefits that your diverse talent wants to advance their careers. And it's a benefit you need to drive towards your business objectives and the key outcomes you are looking for. Have a strategic workplace education program. It's key to career mobility for your diverse employees. Let's take a moment and talk about one of the leading job requirements preventing many skilled and experienced employees from adding to the diversity you seek to have within your organization. Dun, 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 dun. The four-year degree. For many of us, the four-year degree means achieving a goal of being the first in our family to graduate college. For others, it might mean gaining the skills and credentials necessary to move into a specialized medical role. But for many, it's something we wish we could earn, but may not have the financial resources, the time, or even support to complete it. So I challenge HR and talent acquisition leaders to rethink that four-year degree requirement and begin to consider conducting a skills analysis on your hard-to-fill roles and identify where you might be able to remove the barrier. And perhaps consider certifications, courses, trainings, and even nano degrees or micro-credentials. So partnering with an organization like Wiley, who specializes in aligning job tracks with learning programs and providing alternative affordable options for upskilling, is key when making this transition. Not every career path or education journey requires a four-year degree. Before removing the degree requirement, though, it's important to understand your employees' needs and the fundamental skills needed for each role. So I want to use these three scenarios to better explain this. Let's take Tanya, for example. Tanya holds a bachelor's in English, and she's been with her organization for 2.5 years. Her goal is to change roles within the organization, but she doesn't want to return to school to earn a second bachelor's degree in data analytics. She understands in order for her to advance, she needs analytics and data visualization skills. Her manager recommends a data analytics training course that's offered through their Strategic Education Benefits program. Now Tanya can enroll in the 16-week course, gain the skills needed for the next role, and continue to advance within her organization and have some great career mobility. Alex has a high school degree and has been with their organization for 10 years. They want to take on new challenges and continue to advance their career into leadership. Through conversations with their manager, they realize they need additional leadership training. Traditionally, a four-year degree would be required to advance into leadership within their organization. However, the organization understands the four-year degree isn't necessary for Alex's advancement and recommends, based on their experience, a leadership certificate offered through one of the university partnerships that they have. And last, let's take a look at Susan's story. Susan is a new hire and has some college credit. Her goal is to move into leadership. However, she doesn't have much experience in the industry and lacks leadership experience. Her manager recommends a bachelor completer program because it will provide her with the hard skills needed to advance. Although these are simply examples for our presentation today, we see these scenarios happen day in and day out. Without flexible career pathing and a strategic workplace education program, Many organizations are preventing their workforce from having true career mobility, adding to the lack of diversity in their leadership pool.
Yeah, and I just wanted to call out a few of the comments we have in the chat. There's one comment about how most careers don't need a degree. There's another comment about how educational funds are only used towards a degree. And that's kind of exactly our point. You know, at Wiley, we've been around for over 200 years. We started as a book publisher, but we've been in the education space and in research for over 200 years. The point isn't that exactly that everyone needs a degree. You know, before I worked at Wiley, I was in learning and development with a different company. The point is exactly that not everyone needs a four-year degree, that many careers really just need skills and education. What we love is learning. And whether that means you need a four-year degree, some people do, many people don't. The point of this slide is exactly that as you grow throughout your career, you probably do need upskilling. You probably need to learn new skills. Whether that means you need a bachelor's degree, you may not, you may not. But I think that one comment about not needing a degree came in before this slide, but I hope that this clears that point up. We're not saying everyone needs a four-year degree, because the point really is just that we love learning and education, and however, whatever form that takes, that's what we're in favor of. So continuing education is also one of the top reasons that employees stay with their organizations. Another study showed that 94% of employees would stay at a company longer if they saw demonstrated commitment to their educational development. One study on skills development within the tech industry found that professionals spend an average of 7 hours per week on learning, most of which isn't even employee sponsored. Companies have an opportunity to either implement or improve their current upskilling program. The importance of education becomes even more stark when you consider how it intersects with the lives of historically disenfranchised people. According to the Urban Institute in 2013, 42% of Black families had student loans compared to 28% of white families. And yet the debt Black people take on to launch and improve their careers continues to do them a disservice. Another study found that the unemployment rate for Black college graduates was more than double the average for all graduates, regardless of race. And given that Black individuals are more likely to take on student loan debt, which is harder for them to repay than their peers, companies who want to improve innovation through strategic DE&I efforts have a clear path to success. Provide education as a key benefit in your employee value proposition to boost employee satisfaction, propel innovation, fortify your equity strategy, and achieve robust ROI. Cigna, the health services organization, saw a 129% ROI on their tuition assistance program, based on reduced turnover and cost savings from internal promotions alone. And this doesn't even include the benefits from increased performance and application of new skills, which is harder to measure, but no less impactful. But no one thinks of a tuition assistance as a key driver to solving some of the DE&I challenges that they face. Through our Wiley Beyond solution, we help organizations transform their education benefits into strategic tools to help solve some of the greatest business problems. Although strategic diversity initiatives are gaining more and more focus and buy-in, the resources provided to corporate diversity leaders may still lag behind other departments. Even though 47% of diversity leaders reported having the resources they need to carry out their programs, 83% of L&D professionals reported that the buy-in for their programs wasn't an issue. Because of overlapping goals, diversity leaders have a unique opportunity to partner with their peers in learning and development. By joining forces, DE&I leaders have even more justification to make upskilling a pinnacle of their strategies. And learning and development leaders have precedent to develop even more compelling and transformative educational development strategies that better serve all staff. So as you can see, according to SHRM, these are the top reasons that companies create and maintain educational development programs. So the top reasons for 52% being to boost employee longevity, followed by 43% to sustain and increase employee happiness and loyalty. At Wiley, that's why we suggest not only offering education benefits, but don't put a waiting period on it. So many companies, you join and you have to wait 6 to 12 months to gain access to an educational benefit. By then, a lot of employees are already looking for a new job. Make a tuition assistance or education benefits available from day one. I also want to point out that 41% that utilize education benefits to keep employees' skills up to date for developing business needs. Education benefits are not a transactional benefit that only help the employee. If the programs are selected strategically and in line with the business's needs, you can make sure that the skills gained are not only life-changing for the employee, but game-changing for the business as you unlock new hard and soft skills while maintaining the institutional knowledge from your now happy and loyal employees.
And this time in history represents a critical window of opportunity. You can either lead societal change from the inside out or simply follow its course. The businesses who step up will drive markets not to be subject to them, lead societal and product innovation, inspire brand trust, and compound their income. Becoming a thought leader in the DE&I arena requires much more than simply finding diverse, innovation-driving talent or even making them feel included. People need to be appreciated, influential, and on purpose. Attracting and including the people you need to stay competitive and innovative means crafting a strategy that prioritizes equity and involves more than just race and gender, including ability, age, sexual orientation, and more. In review, investing in your talent for equity means implementing a number of things, all of which require a comprehensive workplace plan. So map for career advancement, make sure your people can see a clear future with your organization, build this vision during hiring and implement it once they're hired. Prioritize what you can't teach more. Hiring diverse talent for innovation means innovating your hiring approach. Concerted mentorship, so making sure your lower to mid-level people have senior mentors who can guide them to greater and greater success. Ensuring pay parity. So pay parity should be delivered upon the time of hiring and advanced throughout an employee's career. Continuing education, so offering education as a benefit elevates your company's positioning to prospective talent of all demographics. When you prioritize continuing education for your staff from historically underserved populations, your whole team reaps the benefits. And all roads lead to education. So continuing education as a benefit makes all of the above possible. Working in tandem with L&D to spearhead your efforts will make your strategy even more compelling and help generate the buy-in you need to implement your plan. And with that, we've got a couple of minutes left here. We want to thank you so much for your time and attention today. We encourage you to come visit us at the Wiley Beyond booth to continue the conversation. We did have a few questions to come in, so I'm hoping that you all do come visit the booth. We'll be jumping into that right after this presentation. And on behalf of Sarah and myself, we hope you enjoyed this webinar. Thank you so much for all the contributions and the chats. I can't wait to go through and read all of the comments that have been coming in. And we'd be happy to take any questions that you may have in these last couple of minutes that we have here.
Yeah, I did see one question about citing our sources. So we did not cite the sources within the slides, so you will get the slides. The sources are actually within, we have an accompanying ebook, which you can find within from hr.com, and all of the sources that we've cited are within there. As a research organization within Wiley, we always cite our sources, I promise, so you can find all of that within there. So let's answer a couple of these. One of them, we'll take one. We have tuition assistance at our company, but the uptake is very low. So I'm struggling to understand how it's really going to help our DE&I plan. Natasha, why don't I give you maybe a few seconds to answer that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge loaded question.
Why don't you come to our Wiley Beyond booth? Happy to talk to you one-to-one. I'll hand back over to Sylvie because I know we need to start our next webinar, but we would be very happy to see you at our Wiley Beyond booth in just a few moments.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Wonderful, thank you. And thank you for respecting the time there too. And please, everybody, do go visit the booths because our presenters are there and ready to answer all of your questions. we'll also be providing them with the questions that you put into chat and the Q&A so they can answer them when they have more time. On behalf of HR.com, I'd really like to thank our sponsor, Wiley Education Services, and presenters Sarah Callahan and Natasha DeJesus for sharing this great information with us today. And a big thank you to the audience for participating. We will be sending you an email with your credit information within 24 hours. You'll also find the credits in your View My Credits page of your membership profile once the webcast has been archived. Your feedback is important to us, so please take a moment to fill out the exit survey that opened in a new window on your computer. I also put a link in the chat if you were able to grab it from there. This concludes our webcast. Enjoy the rest of your day and stay safe. Stay safe, everyone.